our new series, the Big Data Debrief. It's part of a new video series where each month one of Tabor Communications managing editors interviews CEOs and other top execs on the big matters of the day. So to kick off our series for Datanami, I'm pleased to introduce Ryan Kolln, the CEO and Managing Director of Appen, a provider of data annotation and labeling solutions. Ryan, thanks for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thanks, great to be here.
All right. So, Ryan, to kick things off, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what taking the top job at Appen means to you.
Yeah, sure, thank you. So I'm from Australia. I come from a fairly small town, started my career as an engineer focusing on data management for networks. Joined Appen about 6 years ago in some various leadership roles, and became CEO early in the year. It's super proud for me to be leading Appen. We've been a critical player in AI for a very long time, over 27 years now, and played a major role in some of the fundamental technologies, including voice recognition, natural language processing, search, autonomous driving, and now generative AI. We're a real global team supporting a big set of global customers. So we have crowd workers in over 200 countries, speaking over 500 languages, and employees all over the globe. So it's really energizing for me to be leading such a global team. And finally, what's the most exciting part is we get to work with the most innovative companies in the world, really supporting them push the boundaries on the next evolution of technology. So, super energized to be leading Appen and excited for what's next.
Okay, great. I've read some figures about Appen. There's 50 million person hours have been spent on its data annotation and labeling platform. And it's been used in 20,000 projects, 10 billion units of data. I've read that 80% of the leading large language model builders are Appen users, and that it's completed 100 million large language model data elements. What do those kinds of numbers say about the kind of company that Appen is?
Yeah, I think it reflects that we've been at this for a really long time and we have a ton of expertise in the market. So like I said, we were founded in 1996 and our very first project was collecting data for AI, for voice recognition models. So we've got this incredible amount of expertise based off a very long tenure of doing this type of work. I think there's things that that we're really proud of that don't come through some of those stats is that the work that we've done around the globe, covering more than 200 plus languages, and also the ethical approach that we take to our workforce. We have a crowd code of ethics for our crowd, so we're playing a pivotal role in AI, but also doing it in a very ethical approach.
Okay, great. Obviously, in the last year and a half, the generative AI has really taken off since ChatGPT kind of landed on us. But as you mentioned, you've been doing natural language processing data collection at Appen for quite a long time. How do you see generative AI impacting the data annotation and labeling business? How's that changing, the process?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. We're all energized by generative AI and it's having a really big impact on the market. Some things are new, but in many areas, the fundamentals are the same. So in terms of what's the same, high quality data remains really important. This relies on having a high quality workforce, strong interaction model with them to ensure quality, and a strong set of tooling to make sure that we get the quality. Secondly is the ability to do very large scale work. So our customers are highly competitive. So there's a distinct advantage between moving fast. So the core to this is being able to access a very large network of workers to scale on very short notice. And the third, agility is really important in generative AI, and it's something that we've been doing for a long time. Our customers are always trying new approaches, and we work closely with them to design and implement new techniques to get high quality human annotated data. But there are some things that are new and that are evolving. So the first is that understanding model performance in generative AI can be quite tricky because a lot of the outputs are quite subjective. So for example, how do you compare creative writing of the output of one model versus another? So to get this performance right, you need to access a broad set of topics and evaluations are needed to do that. Secondly, model safety in generative AI is a bit different. So these the generative AI models are very broad, so testing edge cases is needed to ensure that the models are safe across a broad subset of behaviors. And then finally, a lot of the model builders are building in expert capabilities, things like coding, math, legal, etc. So it requires a large volume of workers with very specific domain expertise, which again is a bit of a shift in the market. So we're constantly adjusting and we're changing to make sure that we keep up with our customers and we partner with them to get high quality data. So,
Hmm.
the good thing for us is a large part of our business historically has been providing subjective feedback to search and ad models. So we're leveraging our global workforce to do the model evaluation, which is quite similar to the generative AI work. Our annotation tools are very flexible, so we've been able to retool a lot of those to be suited to the generative AI model work. And then finally, the crowd workforce model is very amenable to having high numbers of domain-specific people around the world. So it's certainly a shift for us. It's more of a
Yeah.
15-degree shift than a 90-degree shift, but we're adapting and evolving quickly.
Yeah, and a lot of the large language models were trained on web scrape data, right? Just data that's out on the
Mm-hmm.
web that they pick up. Versus your platform is really it's a little bit different, right? In terms of your training or your labeling the data. Is there, have you seen an increase in demand for your services for generative AI and large language models?
Yeah, certainly have. I think there's a large amount of publicly available data out there, and that is being consumed by all of the model builders. But the real competitive advantage with generative AI is the ability to access bespoke data. So what we're seeing is, it's a very competitive approach around how to go and find, bespoke data that can improve model performance. And we're seeing, real world human collected data being an important part of that data corpus.
Okay, great. And there's been a lot of talk lately about looming shortage of training data for large language
Mm.
models. I've seen some statistics saying that at the current rate of consumption, we're going to be out of freely scraped data on the web in just a couple of years. How do you think that's going to impact Appen's business?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept that the world's running out of data. I think to start with the fundamentals that a lot of the model builders have benefited from scraping, and in the old world of indexing data, there was benefit to the content creators because they would improve their search rankings, etc.
Hmm.
It wasn't designed for that data to be accessed by others. So, you're starting to see a lot of licensing agreements now and some controls around scraping. So I think we'll see less of the open model that it is right now and a lot more controls around what data is available for model development. I think the second thing is the current data corpus that the models are trained on is almost entirely human generated. And in the future, there'll be a lot more data created, but a big portion of that's going to be from generative AI models. So there's a risk that the models will be trained on data that is created from models. And there's a concept called model collapse where you actually see performance degrade on the back of this. So I don't think the issue is that the world's going to run out of data. I think it's going to be that there's going to be a limit on the high quality human created data going forward. And that's going to be the constraint factor as compute becomes kind of scales to infinite and architectures become largely commoditized. So I think it's a positive for Appen. I think there's going to be human created data is going to have high value placed on it in the future, particularly when it's hard to differentiate between what is model generated versus what is human generated. So yeah, I think there's going to be a big swing back to finding high quality, vetted, and ethically sourced human annotated data.
Okay, so I take it you're not a big supporter of the synthetic data that folks like Sam Altman say are going to help sustain large language models into the future.
Well, I think it's going to be a mix of both, to be honest, because in some areas it makes sense. So if you take, for example, if you have a really good example of what a outbound email looks like for targeting people for sales,
Hmm.
um, you can take that and synthetically generate 1,000 different examples based off that template that works really well. So that's a good example of taking something that's either structured really well or it's got some content in the sequence and scaling that up for training. I think in other areas where it's synthetic data is trying to replicate human behaviors, that's where it becomes difficult because you get that model training models impact. So look, I think it's going to be a mix of both, but time will tell.
And how do you see the human curated data fitting in to what folks are doing with large language models? Are they training their own models with this? Are they doing fine tuning, or is this part of like some type of RAG setup?
Mm-hmm.
How does Appen's service fit in there?
Yeah. So at a high level, we think about it as 2 points of the market. So the first is the model builders, and the second are companies that are taking the models and building into their products and applications predominantly through the RAG approach. So for the model builders, there's a big focus on evaluation. There's a big focus on fine tuning, on concepts like RLHF. And then finally, red teaming to understand, and really test those edge cases. So there's such a broad application that it becomes really complex. So we're seeing, large volumes of work, and we see, big growth in that part of the market to make sure that human input is used to evaluate and to align the performance of the large language models.
Okay.
Secondly, around RAG implementation, I think there's a few components here. So one is the data in the organization prepared in the right way for the models to be able to consume and index and vectorize appropriately. So we're seeing a lot of work in traditional labeling techniques, but performed on internal documents so that they're prepared in the right format for the RAG approach to be effective. The second part is evaluation, so making sure that the models are performing the way that you want them to do. And we think there's going to be a big push here for internal experts to play a major role in the evaluation of how models are performing. And then finally, you want to make sure that models aren't performing the way that you don't want them to act. So red teaming and checks for toxicity and bias within organizations that are implementing models, it's going to be a big factor also.
Okay, great. The data annotation labeling industry has faced some controversies recently over some of the work practices around pay and working conditions. What steps does Appen take to ensure that data annotation and labeling work is done in an ethical manner?
So we take this matter very seriously, and it's been an important part of our business for a really long time. We codified this in 2019 in something that we call our crowd code of ethics, which has the following principles. So the first is fair pay. So we make sure that we pay above minimum wage in every jurisdiction that we work with around the globe. Inclusion, so we have a diverse and inclusive culture. It's really critical to our mission of helping build better AI. So we provide opportunities to people from all different backgrounds to contribute to that. Crowd voice is something that's really important to us. So our crowd has a valued voice at Appen, and their feedback is really important to us to continually improve and create better data sets for our customers. Um, Privacy and confidentiality, so we make sure that any information collected by the crowd is requested solely for the purpose of the project. Communication, we make sure that we're transparent and responsive. And then finally, well-being, making sure that wellness is promoted throughout the community and we create connections with our crowd. So we're very proud of our crowd code of ethics. We're very proud of our treatment of the crowd. It's a really important part of what we do as a business.
Okay. And how do you see the discussion over AI ethics changing in light of generative AI? And do you see organizations, putting more resources behind their ethics programs, or are they focused somewhere else?
Look, it's varying states across different businesses. I think it's certainly emerging, and I think there's really two components to ethical AI. So the first is foremost is we need to make sure that the outputs of generative AI models are inclusive. There's a lot of evaluation work that needs to be done that it's so ensure that the broad set of cultures and it's representative of humanity, and that that ethical treatment is really inclusive across humanity. And the second thing is making sure that the supply chain, particularly around data, is being done in an ethical approach. So I spoke about our crowd code of ethics and our treatment around fair pay. So having the traceability and the auditability of where the data is coming from and making sure that it's sourced in an ethical manner, I think it's another thing that's really emerging as an important topic for a lot of our customers.
Okay, great. And the European Union AI Act went into effect on August 1st, so just a couple weeks ago. Kicking off a new era of AI regulation. What are your thoughts on AI regulation in general and the AI Act specifically? What are the regulators getting right? What do you think that they should work on some more?
So I've got a fairly balanced view on regulation. I worry that any regulation right now may slow down progress because the market is moving so quickly. So my take is we need to see a level of stabilization in the market before regulation can be specific and pointed enough to make sense. Otherwise, we'll end up with some frictions in the marketplace where some companies will get ahead of others just because of the jurisdiction of where they're operating in. I do, though, think that the first step should be around focusing on the ethical treatment of AI, which includes, like I said earlier, around how the model's performing, but also the supply chain and make sure things that have been, data's been sourced in an appropriate way.
Okay, great. And as AI applications become more common, how do you see the relationship between humans and AI changing? And do you see reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, as you mentioned before? Can that take the place of annotated and labeled data?
So we're very bullish on AI, and I think it's becoming a bigger part of our life moving forward. And I don't think that's going to change. So I think it'll be a bigger part of our future. I think as we wind the clock forward, the challenge for AI is going to be the constant contextualization and representation of the real world in the AI models. So the real world is in a state of constant change, geopolitics, opinion, language, and memes. So for AI to act more human, it needs to be constantly absorbing and calibrating what's happening in the real world. And a really important factor of that is going to be that human feedback into setting the guardrails and nudging the models in the right direction across a very broad set of topics and across a very broad set of humanity.
And do you think that data labeling and annotation is this going to continue as kind of a separate program, or is there any way to kind of integrate that into the applications that people are using?
So I think it will be a mix. I think there will be some very specific sets of feedback that are done on the side. I think there'll be through the applications. The signals are going to be there also, and we've seen this for a very long time with large, long-standing AI models. It's a combination of many different techniques. And I think that human feedback into the model performance is going to be, persist as something that's really important for the performance of the models.
Okay. And do you get the sense that companies are hesitant to engage with a company like Appen? Maybe they think that they don't really have those types of data issues. Is this a solution for small and mid-sized companies?
So I think there's an evolution that we're starting to see with smaller companies that aren't used to investing in large scale data annotation, data labeling efforts. Um, but what we're starting to see now is the realization that there is a lot of value to be unlocked by having large scale human feedback. So I think that we will start to see this market emerge a lot as companies are adopting generative AI models, which is a it's a new world and it's a new evolution for a lot of the companies. Um, but I think what we will find is that because of the subjective nature, a lot of the output, the only way to reliably evaluate the model and improve performance is from that fine tuning and evaluation with humans.
Great. And final question here, Ryan. We're almost to the end.
Mm-hmm.
What does the future hold for data labeling and annotation, and how do you see this market evolving?
Yeah. So I think AI is going to become more important for our lives. I think that seems inevitable. The challenge for AI is, like I said earlier, it's going to be that contextualization and the representation of the real world because we're in this constant state of change. So I think that part of this is going to be solved by ingesting the data, like how it's working today from news, Reddit, social media, etc. But I think that there's going to be a really big need for the human validation and the making sure that the outputs are accurate and representing what's happening in the real world. So I think there's going to be persistent demand for humans to be involved very closely with AI over two factors. One is nudging the performance of the models in the right direction, which will require, you know, large scale, constant model evaluation and feedback, and it needs to be representative across humanity. So, languages, cultural backgrounds, different contexts. The second thing is establishing and refining the guardrails for what is acceptable behavior and the output of the models. Again, what's going to be really important there is making sure that there's sufficient human feedback and testing those edge cases to make sure that the models are performing the way that we want them to do and they're not performing the way that we don't want them to perform.
All right, great. Obviously, data is going to be crucial to making AI function as we want it in the future. So you're right at the right in the heart of that data business. So thank you for your time, Ryan, and for sharing your views today.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.